All right, we are back on the Young Turks with very important updates in the Trayvon Martin story. He's, of course, a 17-year-old African-American teenager who was shot by the 28-year-old George Zimmerman, who appointed himself part of the Neighborhood Watch, or the head of the Neighborhood Watch, which he actually wasn't. And now, finally, Seminole County has decided they're going to convene a grand jury on the April 10th to see if the grand jury will indict Zimmerman. So that might be the beginning of justice in the case. Also, speaking of the Justice Department at the federal level and the FBI have decided that they are also going to look into the case. I'll have a statement from them that they gave to us a little bit later in this segment. And then also, we have now gotten hold of a tape, or I should say an extra witness, who heard the last call of Trayvon Martin. It happened to be his girlfriend. And once again, the cops did not talk to her, have not entered that into the evidence. Where are they? Well, other than helping Zimmerman avoid justice here. So now TJ Winnick of ABC News talked to the girlfriend who talked to Trayvon Martin right before he was shot. This is a compelling story she told.
Martin was on his cell phone with a 16-year-old girl shortly before his death, a conversation police apparently missed during their initial investigation. She spoke to the Martin family attorney about what she heard that night.
Somebody said, "What you doing around here?" Somebody pushed Trayvon because the head said this down.
The line then went dead. Seconds later, he was shot by 28-year-old George Zimmerman, who had made this call to 911.
Are you following him? Yeah. Okay, we don't need you to do that.
Now, according to the police who talked to the Miami Herald, Zimmerman's self-defense claim was that he got out of the truck and that Trayvon Martin attacked him from behind. Now, how could he attack him from behind when you hear on the 911 tape and the last witness saying that Trayvon Martin was running away from him? It's absurd. Now, Benjamin Crump, who is the Martin family attorney, weighed in on this.
He kept pursuing Trayvon Martin. And how do we know? Because this young lady connects the dots. She connects the dots. She completely blows Zimmerman absurd self-defense claim out of the water.
Now, all of this continues to be incredibly outrageous. Wait till you get a load of one more thing the police did to disadvantage Trayvon Martin, who was the victim here, and to give an extra advantage to George Zimmerman, who's the suspect here. Listen to this.
And you scratch your head and you ask yourself, why didn't the Sanford Police Department do a drug and alcohol analysis on him? They did one on Trayvon Martin, who was dead on the ground. Why didn't they do it on George Zimmerman? You ask yourself, why didn't they take a background check on the man who had just killed this kid in cold blood? They did a background check on Trayvon Martin,
who got shot in the chest. They're like, oh, yeah, that guy who's dead, let's do a drug test on him. The guy who shot him, oh, yeah, he's pretty good. The cops, it appears, have been protecting George Zimmerman all along here. So now when we asked the FBI about this, they actually responded to us in a statement. Christopher Allen from the FBI Public Affairs said to us, with all federal civil rights crimes, the government must prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a person acted intentionally and with a specific intent to do something which the law forbids, the highest level of intent in criminal law. Negligence, recklessness, mistakes, and accidents are not prosecutable under the federal criminal civil rights laws. Okay, so it's a very tough standard to prove. Did he shoot this guy? Was it not self-defense? And did it have a racial component? Well, now we've played you the 911 tapes of George Zimmerman calling the cops before he had the altercation and eventually shot Trayvon Martin. A lot of the other media has played it, but no one picked up what you guys picked up. Our audience heard the tapes themselves and said, wait a minute, you seem to be missing something here. And we're going to play it for you here. It's going to be bleeped out in the beginning, okay? We're going to show you one thing here so you can see where he's saying it. After he says back entrance, he pauses, and then he whispers, or mumbles, I should say, what appears to be effing coons. Now, the F part is bleeped out in the first version here. Watch.
Which entrance is that he's heading towards?
The back entrance.
Are you following him?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't need you to do that.
Now, this is so important to the story, we're actually going to play it for you unedited, without the bleep. Now, you saw where you heard where we think he said it. Now, listen really carefully. After he says back entrance, does he say effing coons? Listen.
Which entrance is that he's heading towards?
The back entrance.
Are you following him?
Yeah.
Okay, we don't need you to do that.
That's unbelievable. Now, listen, you heard it for yourself. You can decide what he said. It's possible he said goons. It's possible he said something else. But it certainly sounds like coons. And if he said that, that is central to the case of showing that there was bias involved here and how it might have been a hate crime or some other violation of the law, but very, very relevant to the case. So I want to thank our audience for picking up on that and allowing us to bring that story to you guys, to the family, and to everyone else as well. All right, now I want to bring in a guest here. Bill Bloss is a civil rights attorney, and I want to talk to him about the law in this case. Bill, thanks for joining us on the Young Turks. We appreciate it. I want to start with the issue of self-defense. Now,
right.
When he says, I got hit in the back by Trayvon Martin, all the evidence seems to point to the contrary. You know, as I sit there and I look at the police saying, we believe him, when you hear the 911 tapes, when you hear every witness saying it seemed that the kid was crying out for help, and one of the cops comes out and says, oh, no, it wasn't the kid, it was Zimmerman that you heard crying out for help. Why doesn't it seem like the cops are trying to help his self-defense case, if not even plant it?
Well, I'll tell you, sometimes the facts get in the way of a good story, and I think, unfortunately for Mr. Zimmerman, the facts are going to get in the way of this self-defense claim. There are going to be some things that the FBI is going to be able to do. The FBI is going to be able to digitally enhance the tape. We're going to find out whose voice that is, who's yelling. And it's just not consistent, really, with the Zimmerman's tone of voice or anything else that he's done. So, obviously, a lot of work needs to happen before the investigation's concluded. But it's the tape is not looking good for a self-defense claim.
So, Bill, break down the law for me. In order to claim self-defense, how does the process work? I mean, can I just walk into in Florida into a cop's office and say, oh, yeah, I shot somebody dead in the street, but don't worry about it, it was self-defense? I mean, the police here seem to think like, well, he said it, and I don't have enough evidence to disprove it, so obviously I'm going to let him go. Is that how the burden of proof works?
Well, not exactly. You're supposed to be able to be in reasonable fear for your own safety and physical risk of serious physical injury or death in order to use deadly force. It's not, and it's not a purely subjective standard. In other words, if you're a particularly sensitive person and you're afraid when somebody walks up and says boo in back of you, that doesn't mean you're entitled to pull out a 9mm gun and shoot him. So there are some real barriers to a self-defense claim in this particular case, but the police haven't particularly distinguished themselves up to this point. And by concluding the investigation without talking to some of the material witnesses, it's just very, very hard to understand.
So in order for the police to release Zimmerman, not even arrest him, they would have to believe that Zimmerman has met the burden of showing that this 140-pound kid had scared him so much that Zimmerman, who has 250 pounds and has a gun on him, was afraid he was going to die at any moment. Like, the police actually believe that.
Well, there is a potential benefit of the doubt to the police, although frankly, I don't think I want to give it to them because I don't think this is what they were doing. But they could defer. They don't have to make an on-site arrest. They could do an investigation. They could try to gather data, try to gather evidence, serve search warrants to get evidence, for example, or medical records if that was germane, and obviously to search the victim to see what he had in terms of weapons and so forth. But I don't think that's what was happening here. That's certainly not what it sounds like. If that's what was happening, the police would have said, "Look, we haven't made a decision yet about whether we're going to arrest Zimmerman. We're going to wait until our investigation is over." That's just not what they did.
Yeah, and right now the police say that they are not charging him because if they did, they'd be lying to the court that in saying that they had probable cause on him. Saying that they don't even have probable cause to arrest this guy makes my head hurt. One last really quick question here. The stand your ground law in Florida, people are portraying it as if, well, then that means if you're in any confrontation, you just shoot someone. If that's the case, I think we're going to have horrible vigilante justice in Florida. But is that really the case, or is it more nuanced than that?
Well, it's much more nuanced. The stand your ground law was a really bad idea, frankly, because you ought not to be able to use deadly force unless that's your last choice. But the stand your ground law doesn't entitle you to use deadly force if you're not confronted with deadly force. And the victim here, the Skittles, the iced tea, with no weapon, that's just not deadly force. There wasn't a circumstance that allowed Zimmerman to use deadly force based on what we know right now. Truly, the stand your ground law doesn't directly have any applicability to this, except what the stand your ground law does, and the danger in these kinds of laws is it gets people, vigilantes like this, thinking that they have more power than they really have, and that they don't have to act reasonably when the rest of the world does. That's the danger in these kinds of laws.
Excellent point. Bill Bloss, civil rights attorney. Thank you so much for joining us.